We are back in the kitchen cooking up some slow roasted venison stew. Won't you join us for dinner? Hello my Vital Pointers and welcome back to another cooking episode. I am your host Andrew Penzi, and in case you weren't completely stuffed from my last recipe on boneless chicken wings, today we're going to make another special recipe. We are going to make some slow cooked venison neck roast. It's really going to be delicious, so follow along and you'll learn how to do it too. Today we're starting off with some beautiful venison meat here. This is taken from the neck portion of the animal. A lot of people grind that sometimes, but really you're missing an opportunity by grinding it because this really makes a great roast. I did trim this as much as possible. It's really hard to trim neck meat because there's lots of fat interwoven in the meat, but that's why it makes such a great choice for slow cooking. I did trim off as much as possible and I got a lot off. There's a couple little pieces still, here and there, but I wouldn't worry about that. Just get off any big chunks of fat and membrane that you could find. Now this recipe will also work great with shank meat. You could use the shoulder meat or the flat meat. I have some flat meat mixed in here. Any of those meats that sometimes you think about grinding because you don't really know what to do with will work great for slow cooking, so I encourage you to try this. The first step is to sear the meat over high heat. We just want to seal the outside real quick. For seasoning the meat, I'm keeping it really simple today. I don't want to put on anything that's going to burn while I'm searing it under the high heat. So all I'm using is some salt, pepper, and cumin. We're going to use a bunch of cumin in this recipe. So season all the meat generously, and then we'll start searing it up. Using whole cumin seeds here. Let your pan get nice and hot before adding the olive oil. That way it won't smoke as much in the kitchen. And also I like adding a little bit of olive oil to the meat before searing, and it just helps it cook evenly. Make sure you don't overcrowd the pan. Just do a couple pieces at a time and it'll sear much better that way. Whenever handling meat, just grab it with one hand. That way the other hand stays clean and you can use the other hand to grab a spatula or whatever else you need. Just makes it much easier that way. Woo! That's hot. Some people coat the meat in flour before searing it like this, and that also works. But I like doing it without the flour. I've tried it both ways and experimented a bunch of times. And I find that the flour, one, takes more oil to sear with because the flour sucks up a lot of that oil. And two, when you're slow cooking it, the flour tends to collect at the bottom of the pan and it increases your chances for burning. You have to mix it more often. So what I prefer to do is sear it without the flour, and then in the end, when you're just about done, you can take any juices that are left and thicken them up by making a bit of a roux and make them into a gravy. When I'm slow cooking, I tend to make huge portions. Just because it's a long process, it takes a while. And I like to make it all in advance, and then you can freeze smaller individual portions to last throughout the week. Again, don't overcook the meat here. We're just searing it. Want to make it a little bit brown on the outside. It helps add a lot of flavor and it seals in the juices. If your mouths are watering as much as mine is, please leave me a comment and tell me about it. And give me a thumbs up while you're there. While that finishes searing, we're going to chop up some onions, some nice fresh ginger chunks here, and also some nice big chunks of garlic. With the onions, it's a little bit easier to peel them if you chop them in half first. So with these onions, I'm going to chop them in half and then chop each half into quarters. Alright, the meat is all nice and brown. And now I want to get up all the flavor from the bottom of the pan here. So I'm going to grab a little bit of red wine here. I have some Merlot just to deglaze the bottom of the pan. Scrape the bottom, and then I'll pour all that juice and flavor into the pot with the meat. While the pan is still hot here, I'm going to put in a little bit more olive oil for the last time. put in my onions, let them sweat down a little bit, and then we'll mix in the garlic and the ginger. Onions going in. And I diced up the garlic and ginger, and we'll add that right at the end, because that'll burn much faster than the onions. A trick with onions is you don't want to mix them too much. If you keep mixing them, they don't get a chance to caramelize. So you have to actually just let them go for a little bit, let them actually get nice and brown on the outside, and then flip them around. All this browning we're doing, it just keeps building up this flavor profile, just keeps adding more and more layers of flavor. And by the time this thing is done, it's going to be so tasty. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. The onions are nice and translucent, nice and brown on the edges. Time to add the garlic and ginger. You got a big pot and load it up. We're going to put all the meat in here, all the onions and veggies in here. We're going to deglaze the pan one more time with Merlot to get every last bit of flavor out of there, and then we're going to cook it up. Okay, we're getting there. I transferred everything to the pot. I'm going to add about a cup of crushed tomatoes into here. And I'm going to add 1 box. This is organic chicken stock. If you don't have chicken stock, you can use water. But again, we are just adding layers of flavor. So the more flavor you can put in, the better. This is a low sodium organic stock. The acidity from the crushed tomatoes and the wine really helped to break down that meat and make it tender. So we are going to give this a mix, cover it up, and then let it cook on low for a good 2.5 hours or so till that meat just really falls apart. Give it a check every 20 minutes or so just to make sure nothing's burning on the bottom there. And otherwise, I'll see you in about 2.5 hours. Okay, the stew has been simmering for about 2 hours and 45 minutes now. And the meat is fork tender. I could put the fork right through the middle and it just kind of falls apart. Let's see if I could pick it up. Yeah, you can't even pick it up. It falls under its own weight. So at this point, I have a bunch of potatoes. I'm going to throw the potatoes in there, let it go for like another 25 minutes or so till the potatoes are completely done through, and we should be good to go. The stew is done. Looks fantastic. You can see the meat just like lumps over. It's just ready to fall apart. Super, super tender. The spoon goes right through it. Potatoes are done. The onions sort of disintegrated right into the broth here. Really tasty. Alright, here goes the taste test for the stew. Look at that meat. Oh, it's just so tender. Look at that, it falls apart. Looks really, really good. Wow. That's awesome. Really came out great. Like I said earlier, if you want to thicken up the gravy, you easily can. Just mix up a tablespoon of flour and a tablespoon of butter. Heat that over the fire and mix in some hot broth into that, and that'll thicken everything up really nice for you. But to tell you the truth, it's so good just like this. I'm enjoying it the way it is, and I suggest you give this a try, guys. That's a wrap for today, but thanks for tuning in to Vital Point, where the food is always hot and your host is always cooking. Until next time, always aim for that Vital Point.